So continuing on, now that we found the predicted values, we want to find the residual, right? So in D1, I'm going to type in residual. And so the residual is just the observed value minus the predicted value. So that's y minus y hat. Right? So I'm going to take my y values, right? So column B, and subtract column C from that. So equals B 3 minus C3. Okay. So now that I've done the first one, again, I'm going to come to the corner and then just drag down. Okay. So I calculated my residuals. So the next thing we want to do is calculate the squared residual. Right, so that's going to be y minus y hat squared. So to get the little thing like you would do in your calculator, if I press Shift 6, that'll give me the caret, or I call it the rooftop because it looks like a little rooftop. The caret, and then a 2. And again, I'm going to expand this. So I'm going to do the same thing here. So equals our residual, and then Shift 6 to give the caret, and then a 2, enter, and then we're just going to drag down here. And then the last thing we need to do is just find the sum of those. So like we've done before, I'm going to expand this window here. We found the sum of a column. We can just click auto sum, and then again you want to make sure it's summing up your squared residuals. So E3 to E7, which it is, and then just press enter. Right. So this is our sum of our squared residuals. Right. So a little bit of a process there to go through, but with Excel it makes it a little bit quicker. So typically in the real world, I know I've focused a lot on technology, is because you're going to have more than 5 data values and it gets very tedious to do by hand. So that's the sum of our squared residuals here. Put that in here. And now we want to find the sum of the squared residuals for the other line. So we've already calculated this in StatCrunch. So if I go back on the previous screen, and I'm going to expand mine, box here. In the SS column, where's the arrow, this is saying the sum of the squared residuals. This is the sum of our squared residuals for the least squared regression line. Right, so 3 decimal places, so 0.791. Right, so I'm going to check my answer here. And so now we're trying to see the difference between the first method and the second method. Right? So the line in we're looking at parts B and D, right? And we're comparing how many points they pass through. So if we look here and look closely, this doesn't pass through but 1 point, right? But then if we come back up here, this line goes through more points, right? So the line in part B actually passes through the most points. However, the line in part D minimizes the sum of the squared residuals, which is the best fitting line. So what you're doing, so the residual is actually the difference between the point and the line. So I pull this up, come over here. Take a little snippet of this. Yeah. And so the residual, I can make this any bigger. So what the residual actually is the distance between the point and the line. So the residual here, right, and these are not as much, right? Right. And so these would have a positive residual. So if they're above the line, and this would have a negative residual. This is below the line. And then if it's on the line, it has a residual of 0. So residuals just tell us how far it is away from the line. So essentially we're trying to get the smaller amount away from the line is what we want. Right? So we want the one that minimizes the sum of the squared residuals. And again, we're looking at the squares, and so that we're looking at positive or negative. So that's the purpose of looking at the sum of the squared residuals and why we call it the least squared regression line. Okay? So that's how we work through that particular problem there.